It's time for the Charlotte FC podcast. Well, welcome to a special episode of the Charlotte FC podcast, where we trace the roots of soccer in the Queen City. From the first thunderclap of the Carolina Lightnin in 1981 to the roaring crowds of Charlotte FC today. Today, we're joined by someone who lived Charlotte soccer history from the very heart of that action, and it's Bill Finneyfrock. Bill was a goalkeeper of that legendary 1981 Carolina Lightnin squad that shocked the league by winning a championship in their very first season. He had already won the title before with the Pennsylvania Stoners, making him one of the few players to go back-to-back in the ASL. With his trademark grit and his nickname Barney Rubble, Bill helped define the spirit of that underdog team. After hanging up his gloves, he devoted himself to coaching here in Charlotte, spending decades building powerhouse high school programs at Charlotte Catholic and Providence Day, and mentoring hundreds of young players. With over 400 career wins and 7 state titles and a place in North Carolina's Soccer Hall of Fame, he's left a permanent mark on the sport at every level in Charlotte. All right, so Bill, you've had the rare experience of winning back-to-back ASL championships, first with Pennsylvania, and then you come over to the Carolina Lightnin, which was a new team. What do you remember? What do you take from that move coming to Charlotte?
Well, I was actually going back to Clemson to finish up my degree at school there. I actually left Pennsylvania, was released just before we got into the playoffs, and I returned. So technically I didn't win two.
Okay.
I was with the team through to mid-August and then was released. And then I went back to school at Clemson. I was an assistant coach there, did the goalkeepers for Clemson University, and then started looking for my next chance to play. And with Carolina getting a team up here in Charlotte, I was able to contact Ed Young, who put me in for an open tryout, went to a first open tryout in February, and then got to a selected tryout in March and then made the team.
Wow. And so were you kind of thinking while you were going back to school with Clemson and things that you still wanted to have kind of this career in playing soccer, or were you still kind of thinking, hey, I'll do this until I'm ready to coach or do something?
No, it was always about playing. I always enjoyed playing. That was my goal, to play professional soccer. And so that's why I went that route and was lucky enough to make the team here in Charlotte.
Cool. And what was it like for soccer back then in Charlotte? Like, what was there a certain buzz, a vibe? Was it just like this team on the side that nobody really knew about?
Well, I'm not sure the vibe was there yet. They did do the All-Star game in 1980 in Charlotte, and from what I heard, it was very successful. There wasn't a whole lot of options for entertaining back then. You had professional wrestling, you still had racing up at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and you had I think it was a single A baseball team that actually played in Dilworth, in the middle of the town of Dilworth. So there wasn't a whole lot as far as what you have today as, top franchises in soccer, basketball, football that we had back then. So quite a bit difference from then to today.
Yeah. And I mentioned your nickname, Barney Rubble. Is there a story behind that, or is it just
was
the new kid in town?
No, that was Scott Manning, who I played with both in Pennsylvania and was like the last guy I wanted to see show up here in Charlotte. I was actually signed as the number 1, and Matt Kennedy was signed as the number 2. But then Scott was available and they picked him up. And Scott just came up with that from the way I ran, apparently. He said, Coach Rodney Marsh just called me Frock, and that's how I got my nickname there.
Nice.
Instead of yelling at Finneyfrock, he just yelled Frock. So
nice. Well, that 81 championship team, and I said you were kind of released and come down here and you're going to be the number 1, but do you remember like what stood out? Do you know, like you said, you coached 7 championship teams. Do you know when you have a championship team?
At times, but we did not know with the Lightning. Players bounced around. There weren't any long-term contracts for most teams. Players that, like I said, played 1 year for one team on a new team. You're not even sure if the team's going to form sometimes. They would start, I think that 81 season, we were supposed to have a team in Albany also, and I think they dropped out before the season started. So like I said, it was a lot different today than it was back then. Even the top league, the NASL, we were considered the second level team, the ASL, but even NASL teams that had more money, a lot of times they get close to the season and they would have to go into a suspension year or something because they just, money dried up.
Yeah, it was definitely difficult to get soccer and football going as a national kind of thing, or national leagues back then. So this is pretty exciting that you were able to be a part of that. So what was it like?
It was very exciting.
Yeah. Do you remember the championship night? Memorial Stadium, right? Pretty packed.
Yeah. Well, obviously, for some reason, it seemed to always rain every time we played. And again, it rained earlier and then rained during the game. But what I remember is we had to delay the game. People just, I think, figured they could just walk up and get in. Ended up being packed lines to get in. And I think we actually delayed the game almost 30 minutes to
just
allow
waiting for the crowd.
Yeah. And stuff, because it was totally unexpected. I think they were hoping for maybe 10 to 15,000. We got over 20,000.
Wow.
It was really exciting. We weren't used to playing in front of crowds like that. Like you guys get 75,000. I was at the opener. It was just incredible. And even all through the season, you guys had great crowds. We didn't have much. The only ones that ever got crowds like that was the Cosmos back in the late 70s.
Right.
I was at some of those games, and, they would have 78,000 they show up. But to see something like that, it was really, truly exciting for the players and hopefully for the fans.
Yeah. And definitely, for a big game like that, where fans, we know how things are today, but was back then, did it seem like there were like your regulars and then you had these people coming because it was a big event? And was it just like, chanting and stuff like that? Or kind of describe what you felt maybe during that?
We didn't have like the supporters like you got that have their chants and stuff and what you see in Europe and stuff. But what we did have a solid group that would always come, somewhere around 3,000 to 5,000 would always be there, same people. And, you got to know them because, it was, like I said, it was a lot different. There was always meet the players after the game at a hotel. So we got to know those regulars pretty well. And then there was the group that just something to do tonight. It was a relatively cheap night. They could come out, buy tickets, drink a few beers, have hot dogs. I think that was one of the successes, that they just did not market it only to soccer kids and parents and things like that. They did that, but I think what they tried to do is also market it. Hey, our demographics ended up being like 30-year-olds that are just out for evening out and enjoyed the night. So I think that was a big part of the early success of the Lightning.
Yeah. What, under Rodney Marsh, the coach, what was kind of the playing style of that team? What was kind of the mojo?
We were pretty direct. To be obvious, they didn't even know, about a flat back four. There's no such thing. You're still playing with a sweeper and a stopper and two outside backs, and it's either a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2. But it was pretty direct, and that was due to several things. One, the field size. Memorial Stadium was a great stadium to play in, and people were right down on you. But I'm not even sure it could be legal today. I think it's at the best you could get maybe 60 yards at the corners and you were right against the brick wall there. Wow. We got about 115 in length. Again, the playing style, like I said, at that time was pretty direct. We would pump it up to Tony up there, and Tony with his wheels would manage to make something happen. And, that's pretty much how you played back then. Pretty much through most of the teams in that league were pretty direct.
Was Tony a rookie back then? Was that his first year?
Tony, that was the amazing story. You talk about things behind the scene. Tony was at the same tryouts I was at, but he did not first make it. Okay. A lot of it was probably due to the players around him, couldn't maybe show what he could really do. But he just wanted to be around the team. And he said, look, I'll be the bus driver if that's what it takes, because we travel a lot by bus, believe me.
Yeah.
And then Tony, we actually went to Fayetteville for a scrimmage, and Tony was driving the bus, and the other team really didn't have a full amount of players. So Tony and I played, I think we played at Fort Bragg or somewhere there.
Yeah.
And Tony and I and a couple other reserves, we were reserves and played with the other team. And Tony performed really well. And then due to an injury or two, got an opportunity to play, and he took it and did very well with it. And he continued all the way through that year. He would just somehow find the back of the net. So,
yeah. Well, like you said, the getting of Scott Manning on that team kind of puts you at the number 2 in the goalie slot. Did you get an opportunity to, I guess, not only learn from him, but also did you get your chance in spots when Scott was not available?
Well, Scott stayed very healthy that year, so I didn't get a lot. He played very well. I mean, that year he was ASL goalkeeper of the year and stuff. But I did have some opportunities. I got games in against Detroit, New York, and then I also played some exhibitions. Believe it or not, we played against the Chinese national team.
Oh, wow.
Came to Charlotte, and we played against them here at Memorial Stadium. I think lost the game 2-1 to them. But, you only have 3 subs at that time, and that was it. So they're not going to, usually pull the goalkeeper for a field player. You usually don't do that, just in case someone gets injured.
Yeah. Were you always a goalkeeper, or did you have other kind of positions and things that you focused on?
Well, soccer was a new sport, even in New Jersey for me. Growing up, I was there in the 60s and 70s. And my first playing, I kept getting moved back. We played the old W2. I was a right winger with 5 front players and got moved back to midfield, then defense. So the last stop was goalkeeping, and that's where I remained.
Nice. Do you remember just in the way that the league was, how did, you talked about traveling by bus, people, basically players driving the bus, but do you remember about some of the things and celebrations and stuff like that you all did as a community? You said the fans were close and you would have kind of meetings after the game, but a little more describing of what it was like to be a player in that era.
Well, the leagues, like I said, I think our league consisted of 2 divisions of maybe 4 teams each. So it wasn't a really big league at all. Actually, the Lightning did a very professional job compared to the Pennsylvania Stoners, where we didn't even have our own place to train. We trained at parks and things like that. Didn't have a dressing room, anything like that. So Charlotte did a really nice job. We were actually down in Fort Mill, a place called Springmaid Mills. They were very accommodating to us. We had locker rooms. They did our laundry for us. Back with Pennsylvania, we did our own laundry, practice gear, the whole bit. Very seldom had a trainer there as far as getting taped and all. And Charlotte did all that. So I think that was a little bit better. We did fly a lot. So that was okay. But typically it would be, hey, we'd play New York, and then take the train up to Rochester, play Rochester, and then over to Cleveland, and then fly back home type of deal. As far as the way it went celebration wise, you got to understand it was almost like a college atmosphere. We were all just out a couple years. And, after the official meet and greet that we would have to go to support fans, typically the guys went to this one particular place called Whispers behind Park Road Shopping Center. Back, it's in the 80s, disco, the whole bit. And that was kind of the hangout place for most of the players, most of the time after a home game. But again, it was more like a college atmosphere, even the fact that majority of the players, we all lived in the same apartment complex. Yeah. And you had your different groups. We had a New Jersey group, bunch of guys that all played in New Jersey together. And then you had the English contingent that, came from England. And you had the players that were married and non-players that weren't married. So, it was a mixture. But I would say the after party stuff at the Whispers, and then they had a paddleball court at our apartment complex, and the guys all would get there and play like soccer tennis. Use the soccer ball and the paddleball court. So strong bonding experiences that way. And we had players that were getting their first opportunity, like say Tony Suarez, Dave, what was David? Trying to remember. David Pierce. It was his first pro experience. Mine was my second. So, Dave Scott or Steve Scott, it was his first pro experience. So, it created this little bonding type of thing that we had.
Yeah. And so how was Rodney as a manager? What did you learn from him, especially you having such a big coaching career?
Well, Rodney, like I said, he was the main theme of the team. I mean, usually, obviously your manager gets a lot of talk, but then it goes to the players. But really, Rodney was the draw. And what I learned from Rodney is not so much the technical parts of the game, but how to motivate players and stuff. He was very good at that. He knew what buttons to push on certain players to get them working. So I learned more of that part of the game from Rodney than I did the X's and O's, because it's changed so much. Like I said, the game has changed. You have to keep evolving with the game. Like I said, back then we were pretty direct, playing with a sweeper stopper. Now no one plays with a sweeper stopper. So
So how did your pro days influence your coaching career in the high school ranks?
Well, just learning drills and intensity, fitness levels, things like that were all important. But I actually took a year off after the Lightning folded. I was with the Charlotte Gold, who kind of came in after the Lightning, and I was kind of like, hey, I'll be the backup if you need it, and just probably saved them a little money on the salary side. And then I got into coaching with Charlotte Catholic in 1983. I believe it was my first year. And that was I kind of learned along the way, made a lot of mistakes, but I think what I had a little bit better was the intensity level and what it took to play. So,
yeah. And then when you left Charlotte Catholic, Providence Day, that was an opening kind of for a change, because you had won a lot at Charlotte Catholic. I think
we won. We won like 3 titles there, and then moved on to Providence Day. Long story, but basically got an offer to come there, and I just felt good about maybe starting another program. And it was a program that was down at the time, so it was a good opportunity. And again, through there, we started building and getting some players that, had a little more skill than we had in the past. Now, we had some good players that went on to college careers, both at Carolina, other places, but really started picking up a new method of playing. And I think the '94 World Cup had a nice influence on that. And I went there in '90, saw a bunch of games. '94, which started the MLS after that. Right. More opportunities to view sports teams and stuff got me able to see how higher level teams play. And, we were very lucky with the players we had. And, we went on to win 4 titles there. So.
Yeah. And I believe you were even ranked nationally a lot of those years too.
Yeah. But it's nice, but it's more.
It doesn't mean anything.
Politics doesn't really mean anything. There's no real ranking other than.
Right. But, am I right? Were you the National High School Coach of the Year at one point?
Yeah, that was '97. What's really neat about that, I guess, the one and only time the presenter was Pele.
Oh,
Talking
wow.
about having luck. So I've got a nice picture of myself getting the award with Pele. So.
Gosh. So something like that, that's got to be a pretty big highlight of your career. Whether, besides any championships you may have won as a player, what can you say about that moment and just being this figure? Because you've led 2 different programs to different titles. And basically now you're seen as one of the best coaches in the nation for high school soccer.
Well, at that time it was exciting, but again, it was mostly due to the players we had. When you get them, from that team, I had 3 guys go play for North Carolina and win a national title with them. And just from that one team, I had another one go to South Carolina. Earlier players, we had one go to UNCC here and go with them to their first Final Four. So I was very lucky that way. You got to have the players, and it worked out. And Providence Day did a really nice job with facilities and things. And so I was just lucky to fall into the right spot. And then I had earlier started a group in 1994. I started a soccer club because the soccer clubs were very restrictive on allowing you to bring a team in or a group of players. And I just wanted to work with the young players from Providence Day before they got to the high school level. So we started a program, and that was called Charlotte United. And then about 7 years ago, we joined with CSA and merged our clubs together. But at one point, we had 2,000 players in the club all over Charlotte.
Wow. Yeah, the whole academy system and the whole building up of players and growing them is definitely grown in the States. And looks like you had your hand in making that happen in Charlotte, and why it's such a hotbed for being a good soccer football town.
Yeah, obviously the MLS Academy, they're replicating the professional academies that you see in Europe and South America and stuff. A little bit beyond that, we were pretty much, when we did it, was pay the play, unfortunately. Yeah. And for most of the clubs, it's still that. You got the MLS that can do it, maybe 1 or 2 others, but for the most part, it's pay the play. And that's pretty much in all the amateur sports right now.
Yeah, it's difficult to get the players who may not be able to afford to be a part of that. But I guess that's the good thing about the MLS and having that backing. Now, one more thing just about your coaching, because you don't last and you don't get to the level you have in coaching without, like you said, players, but also you have to have some sort of consistency and something in your program success. So if you look back at your career there, what would you say is the thing that you really learned that helped you kind of propel your teams to greater heights?
It's tough at the time, but I was just very honest with players. It wasn't any soft coding of things. You play well, you were told. You played poor, you were told. And it's difficult at the time. I think it's the discipline that I had as a player. You're going to work hard, and sometimes it's going to work out. Sometimes it's not going to work out for you, but you still got to work hard, be part of a team, try and pull yourself. You're working for a whole, not just a individual. And I think they were the things that, stood out, I think, differently from me than maybe other coaches. And I always was very honest with the players. But again, be the top player, the weakest player, I was there for you if you needed help with something. So,
yeah, cool. So looking kind of at today's world, when you see Charlotte FC play today, their stadium, like we talked about, large crowds, the supporters groups, just the growth of this, do you feel any of the echoes of what the Lightning helped build back then? Because you said it was a really professional kind of way of going about things.
I don't think the Lightning, because it got so far away from where we are now, I think the Lightning had more of effect on the total building of professional. I think George Shinn saw what the Lightning did and said, I'm going to try and do it with a major franchise, and got the Hornets. We used to be out at the old Coliseum out there,
right?
The big cavern. But, Charlotte, if you can win, Charlotte is a very good supporting town. Now with the Hornets, the first few years, because again, same thing with the Lightning, it was new, it was exciting. They won the NBA attendance record. Also,
it was like
you had that big, huge, cavernous place to put people, but it was hard to get tickets at times. And then, slowly died off. I think what's been impressive with Charlotte FC is usually that third year, you start to see a drop off on attendance, unless if you're really winning. We saw it with the Lightning. The first year was great. We were, winning, and it was exciting, and you win a championship. Expectations go up. The second year, we didn't win it. And by the third year, our attendance had dropped off quite a bit.
Yeah.
And, that will doom small franchises like the Lightning is compared to FC. But, I've been very impressed that, especially opening day, didn't matter if year 1, 2, or 3, it's packed. And it's exciting. I think they do a good job of building the atmosphere there. So I don't think the Lightning had any direct influence that way on Charlotte FC. What it did have was start the franchise, bringing in that Charlotte can be a good sports town there, because, we really didn't have a major college in the area like you had in Carolina or down in Columbia. And to build a professional thing. So then we got, the Hornets and the Panthers came in, and, we kept wondering if we would ever get a professional franchise. Obviously, the owner made a big difference there. And, I don't believe we would have probably been one of the ones if David Tapper was not the one going for it. I don't think Charlotte would have been one of those picks. Because we were on the outside looking in as far as, expansion at that time. So,
yeah, definitely. Well, now that Charlotte FC is honoring the Lightning with the commemorative kits and some tributes, what does it mean for you to be a part of that soccer heritage?
I'm just very honored that and it's particularly due to both Ed Young and John McGillicuddy, that we've done this over and over. We've done our 20 or 30, and now this, that, these players come back. It was a one-time type of thing that was just magical at the time, that we can come back, and most of the players come back, and we enjoy, seeing how everyone's doing and telling the old stories and the old banter that goes back and forth. I just feel very honored. I mean, because I made Charlotte my home after that. And, to be able to be part of this, revisiting and stuff, is just a great honor for us.
Awesome. Well, Bill, I appreciate your time today and commemorating this time with Charlotte as basically the first professional soccer team in the city, and just like showing that Charlotte could be this soccer city. Appreciate this, and of course your legendary career. Thanks for your time today on the show.
All right, Nick, thanks a lot.
thank you for listening to the Charlotte FC podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Join us next time for more exciting conversations from the heart of Charlotte FC. Enjoy the day.